An ancient war of humanity against the beings who invaded Earth, the dragons. They awakened extraordinary powers, but even so, the world was on the brink of failure. But this was not the end. The ARC project was finally activated, a military academy created to train the future of humanity. Lehan was a child who stood out for his strength and intelligence. He underwent a genetic process to gain more abilities in a place where 1 out of 10 survived. But he went through the process and survived, continuing to train 10 times harder every day with a single goal: to become the greatest dragon slayer in the world. The story begins with a man thinking that today was the day the new recruits would arrive at ARC base. One of those recruits, of course, was our protagonist. At this moment, the past is shown. He introduced himself as Lehan, a 10-year-old boy. What caught attention was the fact that he was the leader of a gang of war orphans despite his young age. An old man who seemed responsible for recruiting promising youths told him not to worry. He assured Lehan that they weren't sending him to a prison and asked if he had ever heard of a place called ARC. Lehan, as sharp as ever, asked if ARC was the psychic development facility. The old man, impressed by the boy's cunning, confirmed it, but added that Lehan wouldn't just be an ordinary psychic. He said that with his abilities, Lehan could even become the savior of humanity. Moreover, living in ARC meant he would never go hungry again or have to sleep on the streets. However, Lehan frowned, showing his maturity. He asked if he would be the only one to have food and a better life, or if this would also apply to his younger siblings. Otherwise, he would refuse to go to ARC. He said that if they wanted to take him, they would have to take responsibility for his siblings, providing them with food, clothes, shelter, and education. The old man realized that Lehan was not an ordinary child and agreed to his terms. However, he made it clear that this would only be possible if Lehan stayed in ARC and became a great psychic. So the agreement was made. Later, Lehan arrived at ARC base. He remembered the old man's words and thought about how, even though he didn't have high-level psychic abilities, he would have to do whatever it took to survive. After all, his siblings depended on him. As soon as he arrived, he heard shouting. In the center of a group of children, one boy was being beaten by another. The aggressor mocked the boy with curly hair, calling him weak and saying that because of people like him, the recruits were underestimated. The crowd tried to argue, asking what the aggressor had done that was so great. He turned to them, calling them idiots, and showed off his power by moving stones with his telekinesis. The other children were frightened while he laughed, saying that he was different from the rest. He claimed that if he left the boy injured, he would be sent home, but he preferred to make sure the boy wouldn't survive even one day there. Just as he was about to throw the stones, Lehan intervened, stopping the projectiles with one hand. He commented that the stones were slow and that the boy should have used his hand to throw them. The aggressor, surprised, asked who he was. Lehan, with a provoking tone, replied, "I'm your etiquette teacher." The crowd encouraged the fight, but before it could escalate, a man entered the scene, shouting at everyone. His presence was intimidating and the children froze. He ordered the 2 fighters to follow him and ask their names. The boy introduced himself as Del Simon, while the other boy said he was Lehan. The instructor, John Red, analyzed the situation. First, he scolded Del Simon for his basic telekinesis and punched him in the stomach, stating that he shouldn't feel proud of such a mediocre ability. Then he turned to Lehan. He praised his decision to help the weak but warned him with another punch. If he didn't have any abilities comparable to Simon's, he was even worse than garbage. John explained that in 3 weeks they would need to manifest psychic abilities, or they would be expelled from the academy. He officially introduced himself as the instructor responsible for transforming them from subhumans into psychic warriors capable of fighting dragons. The training would begin immediately. The first exercise was to run around the training field until further notice. John warned that anyone who gave up would be expelled. Lehan ran with ease while many others were already vomiting or passing out from exhaustion. When the boy with curly hair was about to give up, Lehan helped him, carrying him while continuing to run. By the end of the day, out of 73 recruits, only 40 remained. John warned them that the real training would begin the next day. They were about to face a real hell. At 5 a.m. the next day, the routine began with another exhausting run. The training at ARC was just getting started. The recruits went to breakfast at 9 a.m. and shortly after, the morning classes began. The teacher explained that psychic energy should be understood as something internal, created from the mind or the heart. Lehan focused, tried to learn everything he could to awaken his abilities. Around noon, it was time for lunch. Lehan sat next to Kuro, inviting him to eat together. Kuro was the boy he had helped earlier and also the first friend he made at the academy. During the meal, a boy passed by with a stern expression, glaring at Lehan. Kuro commented that the boy was Del Simon, a recruit who, according to rumors, had received special education for talented students in the United Kingdom. That's why Simon already mastered psychic abilities in an impressive way. Lehan, frustrated, admitted that it bothered him, but he knew he couldn't do anything about it. He just hoped that within the 3 weeks of training, he would be able to awaken his own telekinesis. At this point, a question arises for the audience. Does Del Simon have a secret or not? Leave your thoughts in the comments. While Lehan struggled to learn telekinesis, he discovered that Kuro was already able to use it. This surprised him and made him even more determined. After lunch, the recruits went through practical lessons in the afternoon, followed by combat, a nighttime run, dinner, showers, room maintenance, and finally, the call to sleep at 10 p.m. Despite everyone turning off the lights, Layhan couldn't sleep. He had access to a much better life than before, with food, showers, and a blanket, but still the weight of responsibility for his siblings kept him awake. 2 weeks passed. Many recruits could already move small objects with telekinesis, but Layhan hadn't made any progress. He began to question what he was doing at the academy. None of his attempts were working, and he felt lost. He remembered asking Kuro for methods to learn telekinesis, but Kuro didn't know any tricks. There was only one person left Layhan could ask for help, Del Simon. Layhan swallowed his pride and approached Simon. Upon seeing Layhan, Simon gave him a sarcastic smile and asked what the reason was. Layhan, determined, asked Simon to teach him a method to learn telekinesis. Simon, with his typical arrogant expression, replied disdainfully, suggesting that Layhan had been poorly educated by his country. But Layhan kneeled and begged, "Please teach me a method to use telekinesis." Simon closed his eyes and asked him for a pencil, stating that he would teach him his method but warned that Layhan shouldn't complain afterward. Without warning, Simon lunged forward and jabbed the pencil into Layhan's chest. Layhan stood still, confused, not understanding what was happening. Meanwhile, helicopters flew overhead and an instructor watched, thinking that today was the day of the enrollment. Suddenly, a bald man appeared, calling for Sergeant Red. As soon as he entered the room, he began to complain. "This is no place to smoke." But Red, impatient, snapped back, "You came in here. Now get out." The bald man sat down, still complaining, and asked what Red thought of the new recruits. Red replied with disdain, "As always, they're all idiots. At best, maybe 2 of them will be useful on the battlefield." Despite his rude personality, Red admitted that Del Simon wasn't as bad as he seemed. He pointed out that Simon was already at a level above the first-year recruits and that he might even be the genius of the facility, being a psychic trained by the British royal family. When the conversation shifted to another recruit, Red commented, "He has a sense of loyalty and a stronger mental fortitude than anyone else, but Ark needs superhumans, not ordinary people. If he can't use his psychic ability, there's no place for him here." The bald man, curious, asked the name of the boy. When Red took a while to respond, the bald man joked that he had heard the kids calling the boy by a nickname, something like "son of a bitch." Then came the highly anticipated moment. Everyone was gathered and the instructor began his speech. "Today you will be sent to the first year, but this is only for those who are ready to become psychics. The basic skill required is the external manifestation, which can be identified by the light in your eyes. Even if you can't use psychokinesis, the minimum required is the light in your eyes." The instructor pointed out, "Those who are able to manifest externally form a line in front of the technician. Those who can't head to the agents by the helicopters. They are ready to take you home." Lennon looked to the side and saw the old man from before. Something different caught his attention. It seemed like the man had dyed his hair as it had been completely white before. He recognized him as Major Kang. Kang, standing in the same spot, observed the scene. While the children divided into lines, some happy to stay and others crying because they had to leave, he remained motionless. He remembered the pencil method. After taking that blow, Layhan was on the ground, asking if that was the solution or if Simon was just messing with him. Del Simon said that he hadn't driven the pencil too deep, but this way, it would be easier for Layhan to focus and feel the energy because now the wound would serve as a psychic channel. He explained that Layhan could think of it as pulling psychic energy through his wound. When Simon left, Layhan thought that now he knew where his core was. Since that day, he was certain that he had started to feel it, but he still wondered what he should do to let that energy out. At that moment, the instructor shouted, saying that only Layhan remained and asked which side he would go to. Layhan stood in the middle thinking, "I have to make it. I can't go home empty-handed. For my brothers." The instructor, already irritated, shouted even louder, seeing that Layhan wasn't moving. His eyes gleamed with frustration as he finally got close and said, "A soldier must always obey the orders of his superiors." Layhan threw his hand back, hesitating. He thought he needed to do something, and that's when he noticed a pen in the sleeve of his shirt. Before he could react, the instructor punched him square in the face. However, just before being hit, Layhan managed to slip his hand down his shirt and grab the pen. The reason? If the channel wasn't open enough, he would make a bigger one. And so Layhan drove the pen into his chest. The man, furious, grabbed him by the shirt and demanded to know what the hell the kid was doing. Layhan, crying, showed that his eyes had finally awakened. He was using psychic power. The instructor threw him to the ground, mocking that he had never seen someone so untalented as him. But at least congratulations, you passed the test. After that, Layhan thought to himself, "Finally, I'm standing on the starting line." At that moment, his friend Kuro arrived, asking if he was okay. The bald man threw something to Layhan and said, "This is the symbol of success. This watch is one of Ark's most recent technological achievements. It's a bracelet-shaped device." As soon as Layhan put it on, a system screen appeared, verifying the user. The message read, "Soldier Layhan in training verified." Layhan, impressed, exclaimed, "This is amazing." Meanwhile, the bald man commented proudly, "This is the best work of my life." Student Sergeant Red started shouting, "The group assignment will be completed shortly. Everyone must join their group according to the list." He explained that the Ark's levels were divided into classes, from A to D, based on the skills demonstrated during the 3 weeks of training. Red also emphasized that it was possible to be promoted to a higher class if they were skilled skilled enough. After announcing the names, he congratulated the remaining 25 boys and said, "I know you guys have thought of me as a son of a bitch until now, but you're wrong. I'm not just a son of a bitch. I'm a great son of a bitch." Red proceeded with the division. Class A, 1 person. Class B, 4 people, including our friend Lihan. Class C, 5 people. Class D, 15 people. Lihan thought he wouldn't care about this ranking. He was sure he'd move up to Class A. Red announced that everyone would meet instructor Wei Shen. When the giant man appeared, the kids were shocked. He was even scarier than Sergeant Red. Despite that, Wei Shen appeared kind. He introduced himself as the weapons instructor, saying, "This will be a tough year, but I hope to count on your cooperation." The difference in Wei Shen's behavior surprised everyone. Lihan commented to Kuro, "Don't worry, soon I'll be at the top too." Wei Shen called the group to the training academy. There he demonstrated techniques with his staff and explained, "You must be wondering why we learn about blades and spears to fight dragons. The reason lies in the psychic equipment we will use. There is no substance on Earth capable of manipulating psychic energy, but the skin and bones of dragons can. Weapons made from these materials cause enormous damage to them." Lihan asked how they hunted dragons before they had these weapons. Wei Shen explained, "At the beginning, it was only hand-to-hand combat. One dragon could kill hundreds of psykers. Although some psykers attacked from a distance, the final blow to kill a dragon had to be dealt with a close-range weapon. This weapon was used to strike the vital point and release psychic energy inside the dragon. Psyker soldiers who took on this role were called attackers." The explanation left everyone fascinated by the work. Wei Shen announced that it was time for each of them to find the right weapon for themselves. Lihan chose a miniature staff similar to the one Wei Shen used. He then asked if he liked it. Lihan answered yes because the wind he felt while wielding the weapon was amazing. Wei Shen thought to himself, "The judgment and strength he showed facing Sergeant Red are not common. This kid has certainly been through extreme situations." Then he told them to do well from that day on, as he would do his best to help Lihan get as strong as that, which made Lihan excited to work hard. After 2 weeks of training, he was fighting against Jose. He told him to surrender while he was happy and came at him with a strike. But Lihan, after dodging, came back strong with his spear, throwing Jose to the ground and ripping the weapons from his hands. It was the second year of the first year after the class president Jose had won. Lihan finally won a weapon duel against all the students of Class D. Everyone shook his hand because he had learned a valuable lesson. Koza said that, as he already knew, he would be promoted to Class C next week, and the class president position in Class D would be open. Therefore, he thought Lihan should be the next class president, as all the other boys had followed him, since they had discussed it before. Lihan thanked the support of the others, thinking that if he became class president, he would be one step closer to being promoted. After a while, Sergeant Red appeared, angry, saying that Lihan couldn't do that. Before returning to the scene, the muscular guys were talking about Sergeant Red, saying that his temper was no joke. At that moment, someone came running and shouted that the worst was happening. Sergeant Red was fighting a first-year kid. All the kids were there, and Lihan, with his spear, was ready. The man lit his tobacco while the people in the academy shouted, "Good luck, recruit. Give him a beating." The sergeant looked at the crowd, while Lihan had blood in his eyes. He asked if the only one who wanted to become the leader was that kid, and if they wanted to leave Class D with that guy who couldn't even use psychokinesis properly. It showed that before, everyone was lined up, and Lihan, sighing, wondered if there was a reason these guys trusted him so much. That's when he destroyed a broom and threw the handle at Lihan, saying that no one could match him and his martial arts, and that Lihan would have to prove his skills in a hand-to-hand fight with him. The sergeant then looked, smiling, and said he wasn't worried about the spear of a mere rookie. He tossed his shirt to the side and said the fight would start without any issues. He didn't need any weapon to fight a kid like him, and explained that the rules were simple. If Lihan could injure any part of his body, the victory would be his. Lihan asked what would happen if he lost, and the sergeant replied that he would just have to admit his defeat. The sergeant was confident, saying that there was no way he would lose a battle like this. He spun his spear around while the older class wondered if he was really going to fight the instructor. Simon arrived at the window to watch, commenting that this guy had really lost his mind. He came swinging his spear at them, but only using his fists, throwing them away. In Lihan's memory, he came from above, but the sergeant managed to defend himself and grabbed the kid by the shirt, kneeing him in the stomach. When he tried to stomp on him, Lihan managed to jump aside. Dodging, he got up, thinking that the sergeant really tried to knife him. The Crazy Red said that dragons and their subordinates sent anyone to death without hesitation, so he wasn't going to take it easy just because Lihan was weak. Lihan was there, surprised, and the sergeant asked if he fought with his mouth, challenging him to fight back. The sergeant came at him, grabbed Lihan by the shirt, and threw him to the other side. Lihan fell to the ground and got up the headache, but the sergeant noticed he was bleeding and fought. The kids were shouting, "Go Lihan, break that sergeant's nose." As Lihan charged with his spear fiercely, the sergeant thought he needed to pay closer attention to his movements. At the moment the sergeant looked, Lihan was already behind, trying to dodge the spear, but the sergeant came down on him. He realized the strategy. Lihan was attacking using centrifugal force and acceleration. So there was actually a reason why that big guy liked a kid like that. Leihan spun with his feet and came down on the sergeant. When he landed, it was a big shock because the sergeant faced him head-on until Leihan's spear broke. He took the spear, grabbed Leihan by the neck, and lifted him, asking if he should end it right there. The sergeant was furious and used a fiery strength that burned Leihan's throat. The other kids thought it was too much, but the sergeant was serious, saying that if Leihan didn't surrender, he would die in this game. Even while crying, Leihan said he wouldn't give up even if it meant kicking the bucket. The big guy, Wei, called out the sergeant, ran, and said he was going too far, running toward them. The sergeant threw Leihan to the other side because he didn't give up until the end, and Leihan passed out. Wei, asking if Leihan wasn't tired of Ark's methods, heard all that yelling, which made the sergeant even more furious. He shouted for everyone to be quiet because by admitting that he couldn't make Leihan surrender, he had won the battle, and by overcoming that difficulty on his own, Leihan had proven his abilities. After finishing the treatment, the sergeant proposed promoting Leihan to Class B. In another part of the facility, a woman was surprised by what the surgeon said about Class B, and the surgeon confirmed that yes, he was going to put Leihan on the promotion list as he wouldn't have any difficulty, since his psychic potential was the only thing preventing him from being there. The woman remarked that the superiors prioritized psychic potential, but for Red, those airheads were completely wrong. According to him, what was needed in the dragon hunts was not magic or psychic abilities, but a strong mind capable of hitting vital points even in situations of extreme fear. In this sense, Leihan had the potential to be the best attacker. For Red, it would be a shame to waste such a talented gem just because his psychic growth was slow. The woman was surprised because she had never seen Sergeant Red praise anyone before. She asked if he didn't hate Leihan because of that first test. However, Red replied that in fact he liked him. She teased, "So you're sadist? Huh, Surgeon?" 7 days passed. The same woman asked if the big guy, Wei, was going to enter Leihan's room or not. Wei was standing there by the door, holding a basket of fruits. He said he had brought some snacks for Leihan, while the woman insisted that he go in already. Wei showed through the little window in the door that it might be better not to interrupt Leihan as he was focused, trying to move a little ball of psychic energy. Leihan focused all his mental strength, and finally the little ball jumped upward. Wei and the woman celebrated outside, clapping their hands. Wei said that the kid had excellent concentration. At that moment, he opened the door and Leihan, sweating, exclaimed, "Phew, I did it." Wei asked how he was doing and mentioned that he had also brought some snacks. He then announced that Leihan would be moving to Class B starting tomorrow. Wei said he was proud of him, as Leihan had been training psychokinesis all this time even while being in the medical ward. Leihan explained that since his psychokinesis was below average, he decided to train before returning to battle. Wei, peeling an apple, praised his decision, saying that no matter how good he was at martial arts, he needed a certain amount of psychic energy. After all, psyker battles mostly took place in the air. "You need to be able to recover your weapon when you lose it in battle," Wei commented. It was then that Wei had an idea. He asked the woman at the reception for permission, saying he wouldn't be long. In the training stadium, Leihan asked why they were there. Wei explained that given Leihan's rate of psychic growth, the chances of him awakening special traits like fire manipulation or teleportation were extremely low. Therefore, he shouldn't dream about anything like that. The answer to how he would fight was simple. He would need to train psychokinesis to the limit. That way, he could say that psychokinesis itself would become his special trait. Wei explained that psychic abilities were like muscles. The more you used and trained them, the stronger they became. He emphasized that Leihan shouldn't give up and should keep training hard, as he was sure he would succeed. Later, Leihan stood in front of Class B. He took a deep breath before entering, but ended up bumping his head into a bald student. The man looked down, asking what that was, while Leihan stood there with a bruised nose. The bald guy laughed, saying everyone in the class already knew him. He introduced himself as Dmitry Van Vorkishi, a leader of Class B, but asked to be called Dmitry. He hoped they could get along. Dmitry informed him that it was free time for martial arts sparring and invited Leihan to follow him. In the gym, Leihan thought martial arts was the training he enjoyed most. The routines at ARC were suffocating, along with the stress and anxiety he felt. Here, he could release all that weight from his chest. Suddenly, Leihan ran with a piece of spear, while Dmitry, confused, didn't understand what was happening. He saw Leihan land 1, 2, 3 hits on the heads of some students on the other side who had been provoking Kuro's friend. One of them even wet his pants in fear. Leihan shouted that it wasn't fun to bully someone because of their weaknesses. He emphasized that everyone should be thankful there was no sparring during psychic training periods, because they would be the ones in trouble. Dmitry watched everything with a serious expression, thinking that this made him want to fight Leihan even more. Kuro remembered how he was always teased for being the weakest in the room. At that moment, Leihan appeared to help him once again, defeating the other students like a savior. Dmitry commented that this was how Class B handled their training, but he also said that in a real battle, the dragons would do whatever it took to defeat them. He said that what Leihan was doing would lead him straight to failure, but admitted admitted that seeing 3 people against 1 was frustrating. Therefore, he challenged Lehen to show everyone what real training looked like. During the fight, Dimitri came at him, and Lehen defended with his spear. When Dimitri pointed his sword again to strike, Lehen realized that if he blocked once more, his spear might break. So he tried to dodge and counterattack at the same time to unbalance his opponent's sword. He managed to land the hit, but Dimitri jumped and headbutted Lehen. Lehen was thrown to the ground. As he stood up, he shouted, "Are you seriously headbutting me during training?" Dimitri looked at him sinisterly and said that the sword wasn't the only thing Lehen should worry about, as he had learned Sambo since he was born. Lehen, still on the ground, sarcastically asked if Dimitri intended to kill dragons with that Sambo. Dimitri confidently replied that he would strangle a dragon if things got any wilder. The students who had been teasing Lehen began to cheer for Dimitri, calling him the little tiger of Siberia. Annoyed, Dimitri complained that they should stop calling him that ridiculous nickname. The classmates laughed, explaining that at 12 years old, it was obvious he was still a puppy. Lehen observed the scene and realized that although the words seemed offensive, there was no malice behind them. They were having fun, united with Dimitri at the center. The only one excluded was Kuro. At that moment, Lehen gripped his spear tightly, while Dimitri warned him that in a battle, you should never take your eyes off your opponent. Dimitri attacked with speed, coming behind Lehen. He jumped to execute what would have been the final blow. In the air, Dimitri crossed his sword with Lehen's spear, resulting in a direct clash. Everyone was stunned to see that both of their weapons broke. Without wasting any time, Dimitri moved into hand-to-hand combat. He grabbed Lehen, flipping him upside down and striking his ribs, finishing with a chokehold, saying that Lehen should give up if he didn't want his arm to come off. The entire room started shouting Dimitri's name. Even so, Lehen with difficulty challenged him, telling him to try to make him quit if he had the courage. Suddenly, a loud crack startled the onlookers. Dimitri had broken Lehen's arm. He said, annoyed that he had warned him to surrender, and confessed that he felt like trash for doing it. Despite that, he admired Lehen's strength as he didn't cry from the pain. Dimitri asked someone to take him to the infirmary. On the way there, Lehen, even injured, punched Dimitri in the head and complained that everyone he had fought so far was a coward who cried over a simple broken arm. He told Dimitri to get up, saying the fight wasn't over yet. However, Dimitri had already passed out from the blow. Later, Dimitri woke up startled in the medical wing. Next to him, Lehen, with his arm bandaged, was fiddling with his bracelet. There was a video message from Major Kang, who said that he was impressive and had exceeded expectations. The Major also mentioned that, thanks to him, the brothers were doing very well. Lehen cried when he saw the photo of his siblings and, feeling emotional, said that next time he should send a video instead of a message. He thought that for the first time his brothers seemed to be doing well. When he turned to the side, he saw Dimitri awake and with a frown asked him to pass the photo. Dimitri, confused, asked why he had to pass the photo to him, and Lehen responded that since Dimitri was the one who broke his arm, it was now his turn. Dimitri retorted that his head had been cracked open because of Lehen, to which Lehen responded that dropping his guard wasn't how things worked. The two began to argue, but in the end, Dimitri admitted that he didn't hold a grudge and said he would like to fight him again. Lehen replied that he might have been wrong about Kuro that day and that he should have offered a helping hand instead of fighting. Dimitri said he understood the feeling but warned that Kuro might end up being dragged into stage 2. Lehen asked why, and Dimitri took him to the medical wing to show him the reality they would face. There, they saw injured soldiers being rushed to the emergency room. Dimitri explained that this was the reality they would face in the next training. Lehen, perplexed, commented that the seniors were older, so maybe it would take them longer to go through this. Dimitri put his hands behind his head and explained that upon reaching stage 2, they would begin using super soldier drugs, which would make them physically adult. He said this happened because they would need to face dragons in a war that would happen within 3 years, and there would be no time for them to grow naturally. Lehen frowned and said that it wasn't so bad since he had always wanted to be an adult. He explained that in the past, he did everything to survive. He stole food from the elderly, fought against adults, and even when beaten, he got back up for his brothers. He concluded that for him, all that mattered was surviving. Dimitri was impressed with Lehen's determination and commented that it was greater than many archers' determination. Soon after, Sergeant Red announced that they would start aerial training that day and would leave at 4:30 p.m. Dimitri, smiling, looked at Lehen, who was also excited for the next challenge. He thought that the huge backpack must also be full of rations, so maybe this wouldn't just be a simple training. Dimitri observed that some idiots were already eating the food from the backpack and commented that they would probably screw up the rest of the mission. He nudged Lehen, telling him to look at that, and was already excitedly talking about Del Simon, the last genius from England. Dimitri confessed that he really wanted to punch that guy. Lehen, on his part, looked to the side and saw someone staring at him strangely. Trying to ignore it, he turned his gaze away, realizing that Kuro was still upset about everything that had happened. The sergeant interrupted their thoughts, shouting for them to get their butts off the ground and get their legs moving because the training was about to begin. They quickly hurried to get on the helicopter, as the mission was about to start. Meanwhile, Kuro was lost in his thoughts. He remembered all the times Lehen had saved him, but this time he was sure Lehen wouldn't show up. His parachute had gotten caught in a tree, leaving him stranded. A flashback showed that an hour earlier, the helicopters were flying over an island. The kids asked where where they were going, but their bracelets indicated that they were now over a deserted island. The mission was to start a survival training. The surgeon explained that there was enough ration in the backpacks for 2 days, and that it was important to use it carefully, since the instructors wouldn't return for a week. Everyone was shocked by this information, realizing they would have to survive with limited resources after the first 2 days. Dimitri, however, seemed excited by the challenge. After everyone jumped, the surgeon was rescuing another one who had fallen into the sea. He checked the map to see if the groups were well distributed. Although they had initially been scattered evenly, some kids had already grouped together into a group of 7. The surgeon commented that this was how the world worked. People gathered around a strong leader and used that strength to control others, rather than starving together. In this group, the dynamic was clear. They stole food from others to survive. The leader, standing on top of a rock, called the others idiots and emphasized that they hadn't gathered to share anything. He said that if they kept stealing food, no one could oppose them. One of the subordinates, sweating profusely, mentioned that Dimitri, Lehan, and Del Simon were threats, but they were confident they could defeat them. Meanwhile, Lehan finally arrived at the island. He had fallen into the sea and had to swim there, losing a lot of time. Observing the place, he realized that he urgently needed shelter. As he made his way through the jungle, he thought that for kids who had never known hunger, 2 days of rations would be insufficient. Soon, desperation would lead many to steal from each other, something that was already happening. We then returned to Del Simon, who was complaining about Dimitri, asking why he kept following him. Dimitri, provocatively, called him the genius of England and suggested they fight. Del Simon, irritated, said he didn't want to waste time on a duel. Dimitri retorted that they could start as friends, but deep down he found Simon annoying. At sunset, in a group of thieves, they heard a scream coming from another part of the forest. Laughing, they wondered if it could be more free food. The scene cut to Kuro, still stuck in the tree with his parachute, while others laughed at his situation. They took his food, thanked him sarcastically, and left, saying he was lucky to be stuck. Otherwise, he would have gotten beaten up and robbed. Kuro cried, trapped in the tree until nightfall, while recalling the taunts from Del Simon and other colleagues. At the height of his despair, he started shouting through the forest. Just as he was about to pass out, he saw something approaching. His expression of joy was short-lived as he fainted before understanding what was happening. What appeared was Lehan, who looked at the situation and murmured in disbelief, trying to understand what had happened to Kuro. Lehan, experienced in survival, quickly set up camp. His skill was impressive, showing that before joining the Ark, he had suffered a lot to learn how to set up something so efficient. When Kuro woke up, he went to join Lehan, who was sharpening a spear. Lehan told him to have breakfast and explained that he hadn't been able to recover his backpack, so Kuro would have to make do with what he had. Kuro observed the little food they had and thought it was insufficient even for one person. Feeling like a dead weight, he ate while crying, consumed by shame and hunger, thinking of himself as a pathetic loser. After eating, Kuro thanked Lehan, who replied that the next task was to find water in the area. Meanwhile, Sergeant Red was watching everything through cameras flying over the island, broadcasting live what was happening. At that moment, the bald man approached the surgeon, asking, "You're not going to stop smoking, huh?" The surgeon, irritated, told him to be quiet. The bald man asked if something had caught the surgeon's attention, and he showed the footage of a boy, Queno, from Norway, who seemed quite funny. Queno complained that he wouldn't last even a week on this deserted island and decided to improvise. He had built a raft and was trying to return to Ark. Meanwhile, Kuro and Lehan finally found water. After quenching their thirst, they began walking in search of shelter. Lehan commented that they needed to find more food if they wanted to survive the whole week. He wondered if there was anything useful on the island, since there were no coconut trees or visible fruits. Suddenly, Kuro stopped and asked Lehan to stop as well. Taking another step, Kuro realized there was a trap ahead. Lehan was impressed and asked how Kuro knew about it. He explained that it was as if his head started to bubble when he sensed danger. Lehan thought for a moment, realizing this must be Kuro's individuality, a sort of spider sense triggered by his psychokinesis. It was a rare ability capable of predicting short-term events. As they followed the trail, Lehan thought that this survival training could be a great opportunity for Kuro to prove his worth to the surgeons. When they reached the shelter, the blonde boy from the rival group opened the door, expecting to find the two of them there, but he realized the backpacks were gone. The boy with the bandana asked if they should destroy the place, but the blonde boy disagreed. He deduced that Kuro and Lehan had probably gone to search for water and suggested they ambush them on their way back. Upon arriving at the shelter, Kuro was exhausted and said they had finally made it. However, Lehan asked him to wait. He noticed something was wrong. The rock he had used as a marker was no longer on the ground, and there were strange footprints in the area. It also seemed like the rival group had passed through and was planning to rob them. Deciding not to take any chances, Lehan grabbed everything and suggested they leave before it got dark. They walked until sunset, searching for a safe place to spend the night. Lehan asked if Kuro could see anything ahead. At that moment, Kuro's individuality was activated, and he noticed a large beast approaching. Before he could warn Lehan, he pushed him aside, and the creature jumped between them. It was a black panther, growling fiercely. The problem was that Leihan's weapon had fallen far away, and the beast was charging with its enormous jaws. Suddenly, a fire attack hit the panther, startling it. Jose from Group D appeared, asking if they were okay. Jose had been promoted to Group C, but he was clearly injured. Leihan asked if he could walk, but Jose collapsed, exhausted, explaining that he had fallen into a trap set by the rival group. Jose recounted that when he was captured, he took all this food and ate it all at once so the thieves wouldn't get anything. He laughed, saying, "If they're going to steal from me, at least they leave empty-handed, those thieves." Despite being weakened, Jose was happy to find Leihan there. Leihan in turn deduced that the rival group was looting the entire island. Meanwhile, the leader of the rival group was reflecting on his past. He remembered how his father had insisted he join ARC when he discovered his psychic abilities. His father saw it as a golden opportunity, saying that after the war, psychics would be the pride of the nation. Despite his resistance, the leader accepted his fate and entered the ARC Academy. The next day, Dimitri was already training intensely as usual. Del Simon questioned his energy. "Are you sure you can afford to waste all that energy? We don't have much food." Dimitri confidently responded that his physique always needed to be in top shape. He believed that to be elite, he had to be physically strong, while Simon retorted that psykers should rely on their mental abilities, not their muscles. At that moment, Simon mentioned Leihan, and Dimitri grew thoughtful, admitting that he missed him. Seizing the opportunity, Simon activated his psychic abilities and asked, "Have you ever fought him before?" Dimitri smiled, accepting the challenge, while Simon took the bait, ready for the confrontation. The next scene showed Leihan's tent, located inside a small cave. He greeted the group and informed them that they would stick together until the end of the training. Leihan and Kuro would go out to collect firewood and food, while Jose, injured, would stay behind to keep watch. Goza remarked that despite his limitations, he could still help thanks to his combustion ability, which gave them a great advantage. Having fire meant they could fish and prepare something like fried fish. However, Kuro questioned whether Jose really knew what he was talking about, since they had no equipment to fish. Meanwhile, Leihan thanked Kuro, remembering that if it weren't for him, he would have lost his life earlier. Leihan, downcast, admitted that he had always believed he could help, but realized he couldn't always find solutions. Now, however, he was convinced. Kuro was a psychic genius with incredible abilities to both defend himself and save others. He declared that they would go to the end together, side by side, because they were friends. Kuro then remembered his childhood in an orphanage in Japan, where he had no name until they started calling him Kuro because of his skin. There he was constantly bullied for being sensitive and a crybaby until one day his psychic abilities awakened. Leihan suggested he use his abilities to pull the little fish, but in reality he thought Kuro could predict the fish's movements with his short-term foresight ability. That way, Leihan could pull the fish at the right time. In the end, it was Kuro's telekinesis that worked. He simply lifted the fish with his powers, ensuring food for the group. On the third day of training, Leihan and Kuro were returning with bags full of fish. Leihan praised his companion, saying he was amazing. As they approached the cave, Leihan asked Kuro to crouch down and wait while he went to check the situation. Upon entering, he found Jose on the ground, battered in the famous Yantra position. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the fight between Dimitri and Del Simon. Dimitri handed Simon a sword and complained that they had brought weapons for a training session that was supposed to be aerial. Nevertheless, he was excited to fight Simon, who in turn commented that Dimitri was the representative of Class B and was being promoted to Class A. For Simon, this was a test of ability. This only made Dimitri more excited, as he loved a good fight. The battle began. Dimitri attacked with all his strength, as Simon dodged and countered with precision. After a sequence of attacks, Dimitri seemed to be in trouble, but he managed to turn the tide, disarming Simon with a punch. Just when it looked like Dimitri would win, Simon activated his psychic abilities, stopping Dimitri midair. Simon claimed that, if it were a real fight, he would have won, since psykers should use their abilities to fight, not just brute strength. Back in the cave, Leihan was lifting Josette, who complained, "I'm not dead enough to scream." Josette explained that he had been attacked by the same group that had robbed him earlier. The faction had 7 members and had taken all of their food. Goza warned that they would probably return, but Leihan, with a serious expression, decided he wouldn't let this slide. He promised that if they messed with his teammates, they wouldn't get away with it. The group then searched for a new shelter to keep Jose safe before planning an ambush against the faction. That night, as expected, the enemies invaded the cave that the group had previously used as shelter. Leihan asked Kuro if he was ready because together, they could defeat them all. Kuro, remembering that Leihan was the only one who believed in him, closed his eyes and began moving rocks with his psychic energy. He attacked the guards at the entrance, easily knocking them out. The other members of the faction, frightened, ran to face the enemy. However, they were caught off guard by a barrage of stones, while Leihan, armed with his spear, attacked with precision. From a distance, the leader of the faction watched everything perplexed. He wondered how Leihan had managed to defeat his companions. When he realized he wasn't alone, he asked who else was there. Leihan instructed Kuro to come out from behind the bushes and announced that he would handle the leader personally. The leader, irritated, tied his shirt around his waist, grabbed grab a bat and charge into the fight. Despite his strength, Leihan defended himself with skill. After some exchanged blows, the leader managed to land a hit on Leihan, but was surprised by a stomach attack that ended the fight. He patted Leihan on the back and asked if it hurt that much, but he said it was a shame because that was only the beginning. Turning around, he told Leihan not to show off like that before landing another punch to the face and another to the ribs. Then Leihan's spear was thrown into the air and collapsed to the ground. Leihan thought that this couldn't be happening. He wondered how his opponent could be so strong. Even while lying on the ground, Leihan looked up and questioned why they had gone so far with Jose, who was already injured. Down below, the opponent, frustrated, yelled, "Stop looking at me like that. Don't look at me like I'm inferior." Meanwhile, he remembered being considered a genius and a renowned author in Germany. His father had used his fame to make political connections and gain many favors. However, the old man's greed seemed limitless, and he ended up sending his son to Ark to become a psychic. Determined, the opponent stood up again and declared that he hadn't come all the way there to lose like a miserable person. He threw dirt in Leihan's face and charged with punches. At that moment, he grabbed Leihan by the shirt, but Kuro came running to help. The opponent looked at him angrily and warned, "Don't try to come any closer." He landed a series of punches to Leihan's stomach, causing him to fall to the ground. Then the aggressor took Leihan's spear and declared that he would never let someone like him walk all over him. At that moment, a rock hit his head. Kuro had been using his psychic abilities to defend Leihan, shouting for him to leave Leihan alone. However, the opponent quickly approached Kuro, grabbed him by the collar, and insulted him, calling him useless and saying he was a piece of trash that should be thrown away. But what he didn't realize was the ghost approaching from behind. Leihan, furious, landed a well-placed punch to the opponent's face. Leihan angrily questioned if he even considered himself useful for anything. He said the opponent always hid behind the numbers, while others like Simon, Dimitri, Jose, and even Kuro were better than him. Leihan challenged, "And you? What are you going to do?" Next, Leihan charged at him with the spear, driving it into the ground next to the opponent's head. He said that everyone has a reason to improve, and if the enemy wanted to survive, he needed to find his. But he warned, "If you touch my friends again, next time I won't miss the tip of the spear." The opponent closed his eyes and laughing muttered to himself, "Dad, I didn't even want to be a psychic." After that, it was discovered that he left Ark and returned home of his own accord. In the following days, the group reunited with Jose, caught more fish, and enjoyed the remaining 3 days of training without further issues. When the helicopters arrived to pick them up, everyone was happy to finally return home. The other students thanked them, saying that without Leihan, they wouldn't have survived. Jose made sure to point out that it was Leihan who deserved the thanks because without him, none of that would have been possible. At that moment, a message appeared on each person's bracelet announcing that the survival training was over and congratulating them on a job well done. The voice said they should wait to board the helicopters when called. The scene showed Sergeant Red explaining that the training had been monitored by the instructors. He said that by unanimous vote, 4 candidates were chosen. With a serious tone, he stated that this was not just a simple survival training, but a test to identify raw diamonds who would become the guardians of Earth in the future. The chosen ones were Kuro, Simon, Dimitri, and Leihan, who would move on to the next stage. Meanwhile, Jose called Leihan to play soccer. Leihan, not knowing what it was, said he could try. Jose explained that holidays in Ark were rare, but the kids were taking advantage of a full court, as all the instructors were busy in a meeting discussing the assessment for promotion to the second stage. In the meeting, Brigadier General Alexander commented on the 4 chosen candidates. Commander Asha asked what the candidates were like. The general stated that Simon and Dimitri lacked nothing to advance, but there was still the matter of the other 2. He emphasized that Leihan from the beginning had low psychic abilities, and if it weren't for Sergeant Red's special treatment, he would still be in Class D. Even so, he was one of the chosen to advance. The general questioned why a kid like Leihan should proceed. Another instructor replied that Leihan had demonstrated exceptional skill with weapons, patience, and determination, qualities of a perfect soldier. Moreover, despite his limited psychic potential, he had refined his telekinesis to the point of creating unique strategies, such as using centrifugal force to enhance his blows. All of this without anyone having to teach him. Commander Asha, however, disagreed when it came to Kuro. She believed his sensitive psychological profile could be dangerous during the physical transformation, which required mental stability. "If we send this boy there, he'll probably die," she warned. Sergeant Red stated that Kuro's second rise was the highest of them all. He was on another level, in addition to having the short-range prediction ability, which was extremely important for strategies. Another instructor, however, pointed out that the problem was Kuro's mentality. Red explained that for this reason, Leihan should advance with him, because Kuro's mindset was highly influenced by Leihan, who currently played the role of an older brother to him. In other words, everything revolved around Leihan again. The bearded general asked, ironically, if everyone was so eager to promote Leihan. At that moment, the scene cut to the group playing soccer. Joseph passed the ball to Leihan, who sent it straight to the goal. Then Sergeant Red appeared and seeing that everyone was gathered, announced the result. All 4 candidates were eligible to advance to the second stage. Joseph, excited, congratulated Leihan and jokingly asked why he looked so serious. Leihan thanked Sergeant Red, stating that without him, he would never have come this far. The surgeon, however, simply responded coldly, "Survive. Now you will undergo different training." He explained that they would use something similar to the super soldier formula to make them stronger and teach them how to use weapons to fight dragons. The process began and everyone was placed in capsules as if they were being drowned. The doctor responsible for the procedure reflected that they would need to hold on as the real challenge was only just beginning. As a week passed, no problems had arisen. However, the next stage would be more complicated. The doctor wondered if it was really necessary for humans to go so far just to ensure their own survival. One of her assistants advised her to rest for a bit. When she left the room, she ran into Sergeant Red, who, despite claiming not to care about the kids, visited the second wing daily. He warned her not to make any mistakes, which irritated her as everything had been under control up to that point. That day, the second phase of the procedure began. They started injecting a fluid containing a dragon's psychic core, a highly concentrated liquid with diluted parts of these creatures. The goal was to force the participants to resonate with a core, which would allow them to use their psychic abilities more naturally. Suddenly, the doctor's watch beeped, indicating a problem. She rushed back to the room and found that Leon had woken up in the middle of the process. He was visibly in distress, and the doctor tried to turn off the machine. However, Sergeant Red stopped her, insisting that Leon needed to move on to the next stage. Despite the danger, the process continued. After some time, the doctor checked on Lehan's condition. To her surprise, he was fine. She commented that something so extraordinary had never happened before, as it was the first time his psychic had shown resistance to such intense abilities. In the end, not only did Lehan survive, but he also physically developed. When he was finally released, Lehan told the doctor that he was fine and that at least he no longer had to worry about being expelled from the academy. The doctor was impressed by his mentality, considering it incredible. Outside, Lehan reunited with Kuro, who had also changed a lot, and Simon, who remained antisocial, much to the amusement of their comrades, who attributed it to puberty. From there, the training moved on to the second stage. The headquarters of Stage 2 didn't look much different from Stage 1, but the training was done in squads. Each squad consisted of between 4 and 10 members, and there were 12 squads in total. Lehan and Kuro were assigned to the 7th squad. The squad leader, Kavis Shik, introduced himself to the group and explained that the training would include firearm practices, aerial combat, and squad battles. He asked if they understood the importance of firearms. Lehan responded that firearms were still effective against dragon minions, which included low-intelligence creatures like ogres, groots, and werewolves. In addition, there were highly intelligent creatures called Gelo, who acted as mid-level commanders in the monster armies. Although the Gelo could use psychic abilities, they didn't have unlimited energy like dragons. Once their energy was depleted, they became vulnerable to physical weapons. The leader emphasized that this was why firearms training was essential. Another important aspect of the training was squad battles, which included competitions in artificial forests and small-scale arenas. The main event was Capture the Flag, a game that required elaborate strategies to steal a flag from the enemy's base. Additionally, the training focused heavily on each person's individual skill, even though it was a dangerous process. This was due to the use of metal weapons, which could cause various injuries even when not equipped with blades. On the other hand, the aerial training was done with arbutus, small flying skateboards that soldiers jumped on and began flying. The game style was simple. You just had to make your opponent fall. For that, you always needed a support behind you to manipulate the arbutus and move them back and forth. On rare occasions, the support could also use the arbutus to attack opponents. That is, if the guy is distracted, you throw an arbutus directly at his head to knock him down. The squad leader continued explaining that before Kuro's arrival, they didn't have a good enough psyker to be the squad's support, but now, with Kuro joining, they wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. This made Lehan a little suspicious because, well, you know how scared Kuro is. Meanwhile, the other squad members wondered if Kuro would really be able to handle it. The doubt was visible, but Lehan intervened, saying that of course Kuro would be able to. He just wasn't the type who handled pressure well. At that moment, one of the squad members, a blonde guy, approached and asked why Lehan was talking about Kuro, as he should be giving his opinion. If the squad needed him to follow that role, he should just do it. The squad leader stopped the blonde and stated that Lehan was right. Since it was the first day, he asked them to take it easy on the rookies, as they still had a lot to learn. The leader then spoke directly to Lehan with some arrogance, saying that even though they were in Stage 2, everyone there was a senior and much more experienced, so he commanded respect. The blonde added that Lehan was only there because Kuro was with him. In other words, they both formed a bonus package. The leader then stated that he didn't expect much from Lehan, as he was the psychic with the lowest potential ranks so far. When he finished, everyone around the squad started laughing at Lehan, even the leader himself with a cynical smile. But you know how Lehan is, right? He doesn't get scared of anything. He lifted his head and said confidently, "Sure, that's fine, because our brave one will give his best for the team's victory." The leader, surprised by Lehan's confidence, shook his hand, not believing he was still so confident even after being humiliated. In his mind, he thought, how long will this idiot last? 2 days later, Lehan was in his dormitory, taking a shower. At the same time, Kuro was practicing not just stopping, but walking and shooting at targets. Lehan thought he was doing very well and that Kuro wouldn't have anything left to complain about. But at that moment, Leader Kavis looked at him and asked, "What are you doing there, Kuro?" He was in the middle of training, dodging dodging bullets while the leader just complained, saying he had no patience for him. Lei-Han, deep in thought, wondered why Kuro still wasn't good enough to be recognized. Everyone knew that with his abilities, Kuro could cause a lot of trouble. The leader then approached Lei-Han and announced that he would be put on reserve as the squad would need to adjust its members according to their abilities for the squad battle. Since Lei-Han had close combat skills, he wouldn't be participating in the battle. However, the leader reassured Lei-Han that he didn't need to be upset, as he could observe the battle. Lei-Han then moved forward. He looked at a photo Kuro had taken of him with his little siblings and thought, this isn't a problem. I'll definitely manage. Later in the auditorium, it was announced that the next activity would be a capture the flag game between squads 3 and 9. The leader of Squad 7 explained that since there were new members in Squad 3, they would observe carefully to think about strategies. In that moment, Lei-Han realized that the new member was probably Del Simon, and indeed, he was there, in the middle of the capture the flag game. This surprised everyone as Del Simon was considered the psychic genius of the current generation. Because of this, Squad 3's strategy was a direct confrontation with the enemy. However, Del Simon's team seemed to lose their composure as they launched a direct offensive. Even so, the members of Del Simon's squad believed victory was guaranteed due to his psychic genius, but the blue team, determined, refused to retreat and charged at them. At that moment, the weapons in the blue squad members' hands disappeared, while Del Simon raised his hand, and as he lowered it, the weapons fell back into their hands. The other members of Del Simon's squad then went on the offensive, striking with swords at the blue team members, and thus the blue team was annihilated. They managed to capture the flag. Outside, the leader of Squad 7 commented that it was great to have a psychic in a squad battle. He then thought of a strategy he used Kuro, but at that moment, Lei-Han approached him and suggested a new idea. Since Squad 9 didn't use any particular strategy and didn't try to gain any advantage on the terrain, they simply launched an individual offensive, relying on their combat skills. It was then that the leader with a stern look asked, "What will you do? Go ahead, speak." Lei-Han realized at that moment why the squad leader hated him so much. Our boy is the one who is always ahead of things. In other words, even if he doesn't want to, he ends up becoming the leader. The guy was afraid of losing his position in the team. At that moment, the blonde partner called Lei-Han to take a walk to another room. While they walked, the blonde said that he had to admit, Lei-Han is definitely exceptional. He and the leader know this, but he doesn't fit in their squad. Lei-Han asked why he wouldn't fit in. The blonde explained that Lei-Han wasn't afraid to contradict the leader during training, and their squad was practically a dictatorship, where the leader had total control over everything. The blonde further said that although some of Lei-Han's decisions were better, there should only be one leader in the squad. If there was any doubt about Kato, the whole squad would end up dividing in the process, and as long as Kato remained the leader, Lei-Han wouldn't be able to participate in the battles. For that reason, he advised Lei-Han to request a transfer to another squad as soon as possible. In the end, this is what he thought. It is necessary for a squad leader to have the total trust of all their members, and Lei-Han's arrival in the squad ended up threatening Kato's authority. Thinking about this, he began to consider the transfer request, but then he had a new idea. In the office, Lei-Han was presenting the papers when Wei asked if he was serious. He wanted to know if Lei-Han really wanted this. Lei-Han explained that all the second stage instructors had to discuss it first, so it would take some time. In his room, Lei-Han thought that now, as he no longer needed to worry about the squad battles, he could focus more on training his body. While waiting, he could also analyze all the squads and their strategies to then create his own squad. Guys were evolving, he thought. At that moment, Kuro entered the room and asked what Lei-Han had discussed with the vice leader of the squad. Lei-Han replied that it was nothing important, and then asked about the preparations for the aerial battle tomorrow. Kuro said that so far he could only maneuver 4 arbutus at a time. Lei-Han was excited because Kuro was incredible with psychic abilities and was progressing very quickly. Lei-Han said he would be rooting for him in the battle. In the training room, the group was discussing, asking if someone so good was really in the squad. They were saying it was Kuro, and everyone was excited to see his abilities. Lei-Han observed from the outside, while the leader told Kuro to prepare well because it's now or never. The competition between Squad 1 and Squad 7 in the aerial battle was about to begin. The leader of Squad 7 explained that in aerial battles, the air beach are essential. Most dragons can fly, so this type of training is imposed on them instead of using hooks or propellers. During an aerial battle, a person can control up to 2 arbutus, either to move or to use them as weapons against the opponent. However, the most important role in the battle is that of the support, who controls multiple arbutus simultaneously to minimize the psychic energy usage of the squad member. In other words, the most important person in Squad 7 right now is Kuro, as he is responsible for controlling these arbutus. The leader ordered his vanguard to move forward, while Squad 1 advanced against them. The vice leader of Squad 7 thought the Reds are advancing, just as the leader predicted, but at that moment, they began to split off to the sides. Since they were prepared, the vice leader immediately attacked the first opponent in the head. The leader ordered the bald guy to go down as everything was going according to the plan they had made. The crowd was excited by the action, while the leader explained that for this strategy, Kuro's role was crucial. Squad 1 support wasn't as strong, and each member of their squad would control their own arbutus. Since Kuro could control 4 at once, he was responsible for controlling both his arbutus and the vice leaders. With his prediction ability, Kuro needed to move the arbutus arbutus to where he saw the enemies jumping. The vice leader understood that if Kuro did well, the strategy would work. Lehan, watching from the outside, thought that the strategy was working so far. Even though everyone was excited, Kuro's hands were already trembling as he tried to control everything. He knew that the moment he made a mistake, they would all lose. At that instant, one of the red team members struck the head of another, thinking, has teams always been this strong? This happened because Kuro was trying to control all the arbutus at once. Then they had an idea. If they could defeat the support, they could win. The leader of the red team began giving instructions on what they needed to do. At that moment, the big guy from the red team charged, grabbing 2 members of the blue team. While one of them managed to get through, he cut down the other 2 members and moved forward. At the same time, the leader and vice leader were being held back by the big guy, who wanted to throw everyone down. But at this moment, Lehan realized their mistake. They should have been protecting Kuro. This was because the leader of the red team was coming toward him with his sword. Kuro tried to use the remaining 2 arbutus, but still, he took a hit. When the team managed to take down the big guy, his support had already been defeated. In other words, the red team began to fall because Kuro was controlling the arbutus. It dawned on everyone. Kato's strategy relied too much on Kuro's psychic abilities, so Leiden left as the victory of Squad 1 was announced. 3 weeks passed. The professor said they had discussed the documents Lehan had submitted. The result was that the request to establish his own squad had been approved. In other words, he could finally create his own squad. The professor handed him a paper showing the conditions for establishing a squad. The first condition was that, in addition to the leader, the squad must have at least 4 members, and the leader had the authority to choose 1 member from each existing squad. Lehan thought, if I follow what's written here, the other leaders will hate me more than anything. But still, he was confident that everything would work out. After leaving the professor's office, he thought that the first people who came to mind for the team were Jose and Kuro, who had already been partners before. But that would be difficult, as Jose still hadn't arrived. However, at that moment, he remembered one more person and went to knock on a door. It was our bald guy. Before that, let's go back to the leader of Squad 7. He was angry because the squad's ranking had dropped due to Kuro. Because of this, they compared him to Del Simon, who was a true psychic genius, while Kuro was just a nobody. At that moment, Lehan was listening from behind. People were commenting that they couldn't expel Kuro because there was no one to replace him. Back to the bald guy, he was excited about the idea of the squad, but honestly, his answer was no. This was because he was going to be the next leader of the 5th squad and couldn't lead his people hanging. Besides, he much preferred being Lehan's adversary rather than being on the same team. Lehan understood and said, don't cry after you get good beating. After some time, Lehan was walking among the group. Everyone was commenting on how arrogant he was for creating his own squad, as expected. Once it was announced, all the other leaders were keeping an eye on him, especially the one with the sour face, who was saying that Lehan had betrayed him. The leader of Squad 7 said he didn't care about Lehan leaving, but now he wanted to take Kuro. Lehan, even though he said Kuro didn't fit into the squad, stated that Kuro would still be the best member of his squad. Of course, only if it was in his dreams. Lehan continued by saying that a good commander should win even with unlimited power. The leader of Squad 7 then charged at Lehan, grabbing him by the shirt and saying that he wouldn't let Kuro go. Lehan responded that it wasn't his decision to make, but Kuro's. The leader of Squad 7, irritated, said that if Kuro left, he'd get a beating. Lehan looked at him and asked if he really had the guts to say something like that since he couldn't even control his own squad. At that moment, Lehan punched him in the face, causing him to fall to the ground. Lehan said, I'll leave it at that for now because I don't want trouble. But if this happens again, my friend, the rooster will crow for Squad 7. He walked off, saying he would be waiting for Kuro. As he walked, Lehan thought, I've asked everyone I wanted to, and now I don't know what to do. Then a skull-masked figure stopped in his path and walked away as if nothing had happened. At that moment, his device beeped as he had a new message. All the squad leaders were called to go to Hall 2. They gathered, and the doctor announced that these 6 were the last to advance to the 2nd stage. Therefore, the first choice would be for the new squad leader, Lehan. He introduced himself as the captain of the 13th squad and said anyone who wanted to join was welcome. The other leaders mocked him when a person suddenly appeared saying they wanted to join the team. It was none other than Jose, who had also gone through the procedure. It was already night, and inside the room, Jose said it was a shame the others hadn't joined, but Lehan thanked him for his trust. Jose then commented that anyone who didn't join was an idiot because this would be the biggest squad from within. He suggested that Lehan recruit more members the next day. At that moment, someone knocked on the door, and when Lehan answered, he saw Kuro there, with his face all beaten up. This happened because hours earlier, Kuro had told Sato that he was leaving and all the members had joined together to beat him up. Even Lehan didn't recognize that brave Kuro. Jose got excited because now this was the same team from the island. But at that moment, someone arrived asking if there was room for one more. Everywhere, people were talking about Lehan's story, and so the 13th squad was supposed to be the best. Jose then said he knew that guy. This is Kenneth Meyer, that scoundrel who built the raft during the island's test. So Lehan asked if everyone was ready because now they were the targets of every squad. But everyone was ready while Lehan Lehen felt the weight of carrying a group on his shoulders, knowing that he could do it. Then someone said it was a pleasure to meet them, and that was the chief instructor of the second stage. He announced the names of all the members, and when it came to Kuro, he asked what happened. Kuro explained that he had tripped on the stairs. The instructor himself realized what had happened and told him to be more careful, as from now on they would have a 3-week grace period for the competitions. Therefore, they should prepare themselves as the category and the opponent would be decided soon. After that, Lehen was ready as they were now in the armed survival competition, and their opponent would be the 9th squad. On the ground, Newt took off his helmet because it was too tight, but Lehen slapped him on the head, telling him he was asking for trouble because he couldn't take off his helmet under any circumstances. Lehen said the strategy they would use was the mobile shelter. Meanwhile, the alarm sounded. The battle was about to begin, an armed survival match between the 9th squad and the 13th. The members of the 9th squad were confident they would win quickly, while Lehen was certain that they would give their opponents a good beating. The match began and the crowd was excited, telling the 9th squad to crush the pride of the arrogant ones. Del Simon, watching from the sidelines, thought that theoretically Lehen couldn't win, so he tried to imagine what the 13th squad's strategy could be. At that moment, the 9th squad moved through the forest, thinking about what strategy to use against the 13th. Kinyu noticed they were getting closer and sent a message for them to regroup. Lehen himself was starting to feel a little tense, while Joza commented that the scoundrels of the 9th squad weren't giving them a break and were coming faster than they expected, but at least they had time to finish what they needed. Lehen thought he knew Endo, and that instead of regrouping, he would try something different. Then he showed that he had just been shot in the legs and screamed in pain while the 9th squad advanced. They didn't give him a second of rest, shooting at him while the others, who were hidden behind trees, commented on the pain he must be feeling, but they would soon take down the first one. But they kept going and Kuro rolled down to hide behind a tree. He thought that if this was a strategy, it wouldn't work as he would only hinder things due to his injured leg. So he decided to buy some time. The guys behind the tree were thinking about what they were seeing, and one of them came up with an idea. He moved forward and the rest of the team covered his back. Meanwhile, in Lehan's squad, they began to execute their plan. Thanks to Kuro, they had gained a lot of time. Lehan believed that the blondie, Josei, would be hiding somewhere. Now they were ready to start the show. The 13th squad began to move forward with a giant log in front of them, essentially creating a mobile shield. Outside, the others thought this tactic was only possible because of Kuro, and that he was imitating the strategy. At that moment, Kuro tried to defend himself as the members of the 9th squad closed in. When he reloaded, one of them pointed a gun at his head, knowing he had no way out. Del Simon, watching from outside, said their strategy had a flaw, and he was sure Lehan knew that. As the 9th squad closed in, Lehan and his allies remained firm. The 9th squad was fighting hard because they had selected the 4 members based on weapon skills and hadn't brought anyone with psychic abilities. Lehan, strong and steady, went toward them. Trying to hide behind trees, the members of the 9th squad talked about extending the fight as long as possible until their resistance gave out. But what no one knew was that the shield wasn't just there to get closer, but also to allow Josei to use his combustion ability. At that moment, the fire started to spread in the forest, leaving the 9th squad covered by smoke. In Lehan's squad, he told Josei to cover the right side while he took the other side. The members of the 9th squad tried to get out of the smoke, but as soon as they did, they were shot in the face. The other 2, realizing they were losing visibility in the smoke, tried to exit but were also shot as Lehan and his team had eyes everywhere. They continued until they defeated all the members of the 9th squad, securing the 13th squad's victory. The glory was all for the 13th, and even the instructor thought their strategy was impressive. They toasted to their health as it was a banquet for the winners, who deserved all of this after the competition that day. Doxa gave a speech, and at this point, everyone heard a few words from the leader, the one who led them to victory. Leon, standing in the back, thanked everyone, as he knew the strategy was risky, but thanks to everyone's cooperation, they had won. In the end, they were lucky to predict that the 9th squad would only bring people with weapon skills, instead of psychics. Meanwhile, in a dark room, someone was saying that the 13th squad had defeated the 9th, who had been considered the winner. Because of this, he needed to crush these people before they thought they were special. He thought, what if it's the 7th squad? They'll probably do everything they can to win, but what if the 7th loses? I'll have to make sure their defeat is impossible. Then Lehan in bed thought that he couldn't sleep. He got up and said that in the past he had insomnia because he was afraid of being expelled. But now he had the best by his side, and he didn't need to worry anymore. So it didn't matter who was against them, they would defeat everyone. The next day, another squad battle began. Squad 1 versus the 13th. It was the battle of the captains. The Squad 1 members asked if everyone remembered the strategy. They should take down Kuro and J-Euro, but they had to be careful because their psychic abilities were a higher level. That's why the two strongest members of the team would focus solely on them. Then the leader of Squad 1 already underestimated the others, saying that if they defeated these two, the victory would be easy since they had the strongest titan of the art as their captain. Even Dimitri, the bald guy, thought irritably they left the instructors behind because they quickly got Squad 1 after the battle against Squad 9. In a battle like this between captains, the goal was to take down the captain wearing the bandana to win. But taking down this monster would be impossible because that was the special strategy of Squad 1, the Buffalo Charge. The two, in the middle of the battle, thought about how Lehen would handle all of this. At that moment, Ron's leader didn't understand one thing. Why the hell is Kuro the captain of their team? The group's titan, Kuro, said that he couldn't see Lehen, but Kuro was shaking at the front while the other two told him not to worry. The masters here will protect the leader. The leader of Squad 1 frowned, saying they should continue with the plan because even if some of those clowns were hiding out there, they wouldn't find a gap in their defense. So Squad 1 started advancing. Meanwhile, Lehen was at the top of a tree because in a battle of captains, you didn't mean to annihilate the enemy, you just had to take down their captain. Squad 13 also advanced. Hyoza arrived with his fire, but at the same moment, he had to dodge Dimitri's sword. Meanwhile, Nut was crossing swords with the leader of Squad 1, and Lehen from above was observing everything closely. It was right then that he jumped down like a seagull while their King Kong tried to surround the two and went for the bear hug. At the same time, the rest of Squad 13 went to grab Kuro's bandana, but they didn't expect our girl to come from above with Kuro's help, making him float in the air. It was at that moment that they both looked back because an explosion of smoke happened. When the smoke cleared, their King Kong was on the ground and Lehen stood up because he had captured their captain's bandana. And just like that, the battle ended. It was another victory for Squad 13. The audience was confused. How did Lehen manage such a jump? But still, everyone cheered with joy, while Dimitri began to understand the strategies Lehen had used. The crowd celebrated and wondered why they hadn't let a guy like him participate before the battles, which made the leader of Squad 7 furious when he heard these comments. The day before the battle against the first squad, Lehen and Kuro were practicing the seagull jump many times. At this rate, it seemed like they would master the technique for the battle. Even though it was difficult to control someone with telekinesis with enough training, it seemed like it was working. However, Kuro was already apologizing because their seagull ended up breaking her arm. He said it was fine. Kinyu even commented that if it weren't for them, no one would be able to handle the King Kong. Jose, on the other hand, said that anyway, as long as her arm hadn't healed, they might not even need to fight anymore. But at that moment, the clock beeped, announcing that the battle schedule had been set. In 2 days, it would be the battle between Squad 7 and the 13th Squad. The next day, the leader of Squad 7 came running into the instructor's office, all angry, ready to talk to him. Meanwhile, in the 13th Squad, Jose was complaining because they had one injured member and were still being forced to fight. He was calling his teammates to complain to the higher-ups and saying that the situation was turning into a mess. In the instructor's office, the instructor explained that this was obviously to ensure Squad 7's victory. The leader of Squad 7 was frustrated because even if the 13th Squad wasn't at a disadvantage, he still believed they would win. In the end, he had to leave, unable to do anything because the instructor had already made his decision. Lehen then told his group that complaining wouldn't change anything. What they needed to do was win. He hadn't come up with a strategy yet, but he was sure he would find a way to victory. It was at this moment that someone approached them, saying that they hoped Lehen wasn't bluffing. Lehen calmly replied that it was fine because, with just his right arm, he would be enough to defeat Squad 7. He then stared at his opponent, saying the aerial battles weren't just for showing off. But Lehen, not backing down, stated that he would prepare something special for them. Then the guy started pointing his finger, saying that this time he would drag Lehen along with that damn Kuro. But he didn't expect Lehen to scowl at him, calling him a Kato. Lehen said, "If you've never killed anyone before, don't make empty threats." And with that, the guy ran off like a scared little pigeon. Later, Lehen said it wouldn't be easy dealing with the situation. First, they would go to the academy. Inside, Lehen was trying to use his powers to control the Arbites. But even though he gave it his best, he almost managed to control them but fell short. He thought it wouldn't be easy for Jose to control the two Arbites, while also using combustion at the same time. They could rely on Kuro, but Lehen didn't want to put him under too much pressure. Even without solid support, Squad 7 still had plenty of good physical and psychic abilities, so he thought that, as things stood, it wouldn't win in a direct battle. Then at that moment, Jose came in saying he had a problem. He made his fire rise, saying that since there was nothing flammable in the air, his combustion would be very effective. And since everyone would be flying fast, he wouldn't be able to keep up with the movements. At that point, Squad 7, watching from above, said they didn't have to worry about anything. To them, it would just be a child's game. On the day of the battle, everyone was confused. Lehen had an injured arm, but they were still made to fight. Dimitri realized that this was probably done to ensure the 13th Squad would lose. He then asked "What are you doing? Didn't you say you didn't want to be by my side?" And Lehan replied, "Then I'll stay behind." Dimitri retorted, "But behind is worse, you useless idiot. Or are you trying to act all buddy-buddy?" Then Del Simon said that even though it was really tough for them, everyone was on the battlefield. The leader of Squad 7 said they would destroy them completely. Lehan then moved forward, telling Jose to handle everything since he was the center of their strategy for victory. The system announced that the battle was about to begin and the Arbites were already in the arena. But at that moment, everyone watching was shocked by what they saw. The 13th squad went crazy. Even the leader of Squad 7 didn't understand what was happening. They were raising a total of 16 Arbites, which seemed almost impossible since the average number of Arbites operated at stage 2 was 2 per person. This made the leader of Squad 7 very worried. Meanwhile, Lehan was heading toward them with complete calmness to defeat them. The leader of Squad 7 then said they didn't need to worry about that. They just had to follow the plan and with the right mindset, destroy the entire 13th squad. At that moment, Lehan started to concentrate his power. They had never stopped training their telekinesis for any reason, and even though his ability was below average, he managed to focus it wherever he wanted. And by using this, not only could he control objects, but he could launch them at extreme speeds. Hey everyone, did you enjoy this story? I really liked it. If you want to follow the next part, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. See you in the next story, guys.